What's the wine is. Let's just do the reveal, see if buying the most expensive wine's worth it, or see what I prefer. I'm Matthew Horkey. For the last 7 years, I've traveled around the world tasting thousands of wines annually in search of the most unique, exciting, and expensive bottles on the planet. When I first started out in wine, whenever I saw a bottle on the shelf, I figured, oh, that producer just makes that one wine. I remember when I first visited a winery that I actually was a big fan of and realized, oh my gosh, they make a lot of wines. They make a pretty big portfolio. Producers usually make a whole range of wines, everything from a little bit more entry level to mid-range to ones that are really expensive. So is it worth it to buy the more expensive wine in the range? I've heard a lot of people say, find a great producer. Just buy their entry level wine, you should be fine. Well, that's kind of yes and no. For me, usually the most expensive wine in the portfolio isn't to my taste. Also, because those wines usually should be aged a little bit longer. If they're red wines, they're usually a little bit richer, a little bit denser, and they usually have a little bit more oak. What about the mid-priced wine? Is it worth your extra dollars? If you follow the channel, you know I usually subscribe to this quality price graph where I find in America, and when you're talking about shelf price, wine quality takes a huge jump between the $25 and the $50 range. I think you can drink great wines if you know what you're looking for. When you start to go above $50 into triple figures or even thousands of dollars, you start to get diminishing returns in terms of price. In Europe, that scale can slide down a little bit more. In Portugal especially, I found some great wines under 10 bucks. That sounds great in theory. Let's put it to the test here. I have a range of red wines from a producer's portfolio, everything from entry level to mid-range to the most expensive. This is Villa Trasqua from Chianti Classico in Tuscany. So we're talking about Sangiovese, you know, the grape that I absolutely love. Chianti Classico, which is different from Chianti. We gotta look for the Black Rooster. But Chianti Classico, you're gonna see 3 different types of wines in producer's portfolio. Chianti Classico Annata, this is the standard wine. This wine can only be released 1 year after the harvest date. Then you step up to Chianti Classico Riservas. These wines can only be released 24 months after the harvest. They have stricter yield control, so theoretically they should be better grapes, longer aging requirements. They're wines that I usually like to buy and drink. I think there's a good balance between drinkability, ageability, and enjoyment right away. And the third tier, you have Chianti Classico Gran Selezione. These need to be released 30 months after the harvest. Stricter yields, tighter controls. In essence, they're supposed to be the best wines of the estate. That's in theory. The rubber meets the road when we blind taste. The Villa Trasqua Chianti Classico, I've seen it for around 18 bucks, sometimes lower than that. The Chianti Classico Riserva for 30, and I have here the Chianti Classico 1000 Miglia Gran Selezione. It was made in collaboration with the 1000 Miglia race, 1000 mile race. This Magnum at the winery, we're talking about 100 euros. We're gonna get these blinded. We're gonna taste which ones I think are the best value for money and what I would buy. Obviously, we have the Magnum here, so I'm gonna pull a couple of tasting samples with a Corvin from these bottles, and then in place of this huge bottle, I'll just put a placeholder bottle that's about the same size, just so I know that this is the Magnum when I do the reveal. Okay, fair enough? Let's get tasting. Tasting with my Gabriel Glas Standart editions. I absolutely love these glasses. They work great with Chianti Classico and a variety of other wines. I'll leave a link in the description below. If you purchase it with the link, it helps the channel a lot. I appreciate it. Just to make it a little more difficult on myself, I have 2 vintages of Chianti Classico Riserva. 2016, 2017. To me, 2016 was outstanding in Tuscany. One of my favorite recent vintages, maybe in all of Europe too. Villa Trasqua, not super well-known producer, but they have the same consultant as the more famous Fontodi and Felsina, 2 very well-known producers. I tasted their Chianti Classico a long time ago before I was working in the industry. Super excited for their Chianti Classico Annata and their Riserva. They use a little Merlot, I think a little bit of Cabernet Franc too, which I'm okay with. And the Gran Selezione is pure Sangiovese. Let's get into it. Wine number 1. It's just a warmer style of Chianti Classico, a lot of fruit, pure sour cherry. It just smells awesome. Sour cherry, pepper, earth. The sour cherry really jumps out. Smells awesome. Wine 1 has everything I want in Chianti Classico in terms of nose. Smells just like a quintessential Sangiovese. On the palate, it's not as fruity, so maybe not a lot of people are going to enjoy it. I enjoy it. Sangiovese tannins can get a little bit too aggressive. These are not. These are round, plush, so I think it's going to be easy for a lot of people to drink. Nice wine. Let's move on to wine 2. Wine 2 smells a little more complex. Wine 1 smells a little fresher. Wine 2 smells a little bit like it's got some age. Smells nice. Hold on. Wine 2 has that sour cherry, those fruit flavors, but it's a little bit rounder, a little more complex, has some more of those tobacco cedar type notes. And the length here is what really stands out. It's really quite a long wine. Really nice wine, actually. Really nice. Okay, wine 3 and 4. You can't always just go by what you read or reviews. You just got to go by your own taste. You got to go by your own palate. That's why it's important to visit producers, go to tastings, taste the wines that you like, hopefully without any influence, and then pick what you want to buy. Maybe you'll find that you don't have such expensive taste. Me personally, lately, I want more fresher red wines and more whites, which thankfully whites are more affordable. Okay, wine 3. Wine 3 is the most explosive. So far, I think it's the best wine out of the 4. It's got some sour cherry, rose petal, tobacco, cedar. 1 felt like the freshest, the youngest. 2, maybe the most aged. This is like in between. That's what I think so far. And that's why it's tough here. The first 3 are all pretty close. So maybe it turns out I'll end up liking one of the younger wines a little bit more. Again, it comes down to personal preference. Okay, let's move on to wine number 4 here. The Gran Selezione, it doesn't, so far in the noses, doesn't stand out. That is one of the criticisms of the Gran Selezione category. Sometimes they're harder to distinguish from the Chianti Classico Riserva wines. Sour cherry and black cherry flavors. This fruit just smells pure. Maybe this is the Gran. It just smells like a pure crystalline type flavor. Hold on now. I think 1 and 4 are the youngest wines, but I can't tell which one's the Gran Selezione. Let's see here. These are all samples. Villa Trasqua, thank you so much for sending me. This is not paid for, but the Gran Selezione is a young wine. It's 2018, the same as the Annata. It's not even released yet, and I don't know. I'm having a hard time determining what's what. I know what quality is, but in my mind, I'm trying to think of what the wine is. Let's just do the reveal, see if buying the most expensive wine's worth it, or see what I prefer. You ready? Let's get it. First of all these are above 90, so whatever the Annata is, the normal one that's 18 bucks, I'm just gonna say go ahead, go out and buy it. I really like a lot of these wines. These remind me more of the Felsina style, wines from the south of Chianti Classico, a little lower elevation, a little bit warmer, a little more fruitier. The tannins are a little bit rounder, so for those of you that don't like some of those grippy, astringent tannins in young Chianti Classico, this is something that you might wanna go for. I mean, don't get me wrong, the tannins are still there, they're just not super aggressive. They're more round and plush. They massage your palate. They don't grip at it. Wine 1. I think this is the Annata. I give it 90 points. Sour cherry, just pure fruit Sangiovese characteristics on the palate. The finish, it was not as fruity. It's not as long as I'd like. That's why I think that it might be the Annata. Still, I think it's an excellent wine. I'm going to say 90 points. Let's see if this is the Annata. Yes, it is. It'd be funny if I got them mixed up. This is a Chianti Classico 2018. This is the Annata. This has a little bit of Merlot, a little bit of Cabernet Franc in it. 90 points at 18 bucks. I mean, I think that you can't go wrong there. I think it's a really good wine. Wine 1 and 4 were tasted like the youngest to me. 4, again, sour cherry, pure crystalline flavors. But the difference between 1 and 4 had a little bit more length. When I tasted them side by side, it had this roundness, this length, and complexity. Great wines have like this symphony. I almost relate it to if you have fresh squeezed juice for the first time, especially cold pressed juice. There's especially a citrusy and orange juice. There's just this nice balance between acid and sugar in your mouth. It's like dancing. Okay, wine 4, nice, 91 points. Let's see what it is, shall we? Is it the Gran Selezione? This is the Chianti Classico Fanatico, Chianti Classico Riserva 2017. Very nice wine at 30 bucks, 91 points. I think it's good. Let's go down to the top 2, see what's worth what. Before we reveal, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, click on the bell so you know when new videos are coming out. And tell me, do you buy the most expensive wine in a producer's portfolio? You go for mid-range or you go for the entry level? I'd like to know. Okay, second place. I do know we have the Annata out of the way. We have one Riserva out of the way, so there is one Riserva here, and there's the Gran Selezione. Number 2, rounder cedar notes. This tasted and smelled the most developed. I would guess is probably a Chianti Classico Riserva. 92 points. This is the Chianti Classico Fanatico Riserva 2016. This is the current release. I don't think 17's even released. 30 bucks. I think it's a delicious wine. This is something I'd go for. Okay, looks like the one that I thought was the best It just had the most balance, the most length out of everything, out of all 4 of the wines. And what do you know, this is the placeholder. I put this in place of the Magnum. So at 93 points, the winner is the Villa Trasqua Chianti Classico Gran Selezione 1000 Miglia. So that's what ended up winning. Look, here the Gran Selezione is the best wine, but we're talking about subtle differences. Is that extra money worth it to you? For some people that want, you know, the best of the best, money's no object, fine. You just spend what you want to get the best wines for your palate. But know your palate. The most expensive wine's not always the best wine for you specifically. My favorite in the tasting, I said usually I don't like the most expensive wine. In this case, I did. This is a €100 wine. But, you know, 93 points, it's not, this is just as good. 2016, really close at $30, 30% of the price. For a lot of people, you're going to be completely happy with the Annata. $18 is a heck of a bargain. Most people want something that's just delicious. When it comes to really high quality wines, the differences you're just noticing up front in the first taste, because as you start to drink the wine, your palate starts to become normalized to it. And also, if you're drinking it with food, the most inexpensive wine is more than enough. For my money, I'd be going with 2016, the Chianti Classico Riserva, so the mid-priced wine. But that's just me. You have your own palate. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm gonna drink these wines. I'm super happy. Cheers.